Alright, good evening everyone. I believe some of you are already. Okay, so let's get started. Okay. For some of you that missed my previous classes, which was Google Classroom, well, I may, in one way or another, do another class. Like a friend of mine actually recommended that I do another class in order to allow those people that just joined to meet up and follow up. So I'll do my best to come up with a day for that one. So today we are going to be talking about arrays and objects. So before we dive in, remember, for those that have been attending my class, you should remember this folder, Javascript tutorials. So if I go in, these are the two classes we've had before, functions and HTML and CSS crash course. So today I'm going to create a new folder and call this one arrays. So we're going to start with arrays, and then within this one I'm going to open my code blocks to start my project. So I'm using my command line to do that, to make it a whole lot faster, instead of going to VS Code and trying to select folder. Once you start getting a hang of programming, you feel more comfortable working with terminals than working with than clicking here and there. I personally do more work on the terminal than click here, click there, click there, click here. Understand? Okay. So VS Code is open. It's still loading. So arrays. What's an array? Array is just simply a regular JavaScript variable that allows us to hold multiple values, unlike the regular values that we are acquainted to, which just holds only one single value. But for this, for arrays, we use them to hold multiple values. So let's initialize our boilerplate code, and I believe you all do know how to do this, or better yet, those that have been with me from the beginning knows how to do this. So put our text in here. Let's call it JavaScript tutorials as well, and then underneath I link my script tag. Specify the source attributes as always, which is either the name of the JavaScript file, including the extension, or the absolute path to the JavaScript file, including the extension. So I can open this with live server, but I don't have it installed at this point in time. You have to install the extension live server. So reveal this and then review it to my browser. So at this point in time, this is all we get, and our dev2, this is also all we get. So I'm going to be doing something today in order to make the whole process a whole lot easier. So let me take this to the side and then bring this to the other side, so we can see both the browser and the text editor. I don't need to be going back and forth. Okay, so now talking about array, to declare an array you just simply need to const or let my array, in this case is a name I define myself, and then square brackets, dead simple. This is how we define an array. Now within an array we can have multiple values, like I said, and the values can be anything or any data type supported in JavaScript. the values of an array ranges from numbers, strings to even functions. You can put a function inside an array. So I can put here, let's say mango, orange, and grape, for instance. And then if I log this to the console, my array, save this, go to the browser, refresh, we get this, my array, we get the content of this array. That's simple. Now you see, it allows us to hold multiple value, unlike the regular variables that can only hold one value. For instance, if I want to do all of this, I would have to say maybe const fruit1, then initialize this to mango, and then do the same thing, say fruit2, and initialize this to orange. So you get the whole idea. So in this scenario, I'm using different variable, but with an array I just need one reference for multiple values. So this approach of declaring an array is called the array literal. So I just use the array literal to initialize an array. Also, you can use the new keyword to initialize an array. So I can come here and say const my array 2 and set is equal to new array, and then passing, let's say, text hello world. Then I can just console.log my array 2. If I save, go back to the browser and refresh, you get the second array at the bottom. So you either use the new keyword, which is the array constructor. This is an array constructor, or you use the array literal. Now you have no good reason to use this, because this is same as using the literal. So it is best you just use the array literal than using the new keyword. Okay, so now referencing elements of an array is very simple, understand? So if I want to get the first element of an array, I can just simply say my array subscript 0. This references to the element of an array is with numbers. You indicate the reference using numbers starting from 0. So if I save this, go back to the browser and refresh, I get mango, which is the first element inside this array. So the next one is going to be at position 1. So if I refresh, you get orange. You understand? You get the whole picture. Yes. So now arrays come with some properties and methods. Properties are just like variables. I think we discussed about object literals before. So properties are like variables that are tied to a particular object. So arrays come with properties and methods by default, which allows us to actually manipulate the array more conveniently. For instance, for me to know the number of elements in the array, I can use the property called length. So if I do console.log my array dot length and save, go back to the browser and refresh, we get the size of the array. At this point in time, it's 3. You understand? So that's simple. With this length property, you can actually do a little trick, like for instance, get the last element of an array. So I can just do console.log my array subscript my array dot length -1. So if I save this, go back to the browser and refresh, you get great, because what it simply does is return 3. This my array dot length returns 3, and then we subtract 1 from it, which will give us 2, which points to the last element of the array. Remember, the first one is at position 0, the next one is 1, and the last one is bound to be 2. Now the advantage of using this is that when the array changes, when probably the another element is added to the array, you can easily get the length or identify the last element without getting to actually know the length yourself. Now, some of the methods that we use for array, or I'm going to highlight some of the common methods. I'm not going to dive in deep as this is a beginner's course. So one of the methods we use is the sort method. If I do console.log my array dot sort, and then I save this, go back to the browser and refresh, we get the array in ascending order. You notice, yes, it's now in ascending order. Also, we have another method that is opposite to this, which is called reverse. So I can simply do a console.log my array dot reverse, and then save this, go back to the browser, refresh, we get the array in the reverse order. You understand? Now, properties don't have this parenthesis, this pair of parenthesis in the front of it. So this is a property and this is a method. Methods are being invoked. Remember when we discussed about functions? After defining a function, you have to invoke it for it to be executed. So do methods behave? Because methods are actually functions tied to an object. Understand? So we have to invoke them. That's the whole idea of this parenthesis here. So that's also an easy way to identify methods or differentiate between methods and properties. When you see this parenthesis in front of it, you know it's a method. When you don't see it, then obviously it's a property. So another common method that we use in JavaScript to manipulate array is the push. So push allows us to add new elements to the end of an array. So for instance, I can do my array the push and then add what would I add now? Banana, for instance, and then if I console.log my array at this point in time and save, refresh, you see we now have banana at the end of the array. It's not being sorted because this instruction has already changed the order of the array before we finally added the banana. So that's why it's at the end. You understand? If I comment this out to sort it in ascending, then add banana at the end, this is reverse. So it's always going to be at the end of the array. Always. Push adds a new element to the end of the array. If I comment both of these out, save, go back to the browser and refresh, you see it follows the first structure which I defined here, and then at the end the banana was inserted. You understand? I believe you do understand. Okay, moving on, we have the opposite of this guy, the push method. Push adds. We have a method that removes, which is called pop. So push adds to the last position, then pop removes from the last position, and as a return value, it returns the element that has been removed. So if I can do console.log my array dot pop. Remember, it's a method, so I have to invoke it. Then underneath, I console.log my array. If I save this, go back to the browser and refresh, you see we get banana here because banana was removed by this pop method. Once it removes the element, it returns it, so we can actually store it in a variable. And then the arrays the array itself, the original array, reduces by one element. You notice banana is no longer here. So like I said before, you can actually store the value in a variable. Let's say banana, I can set it equal to whatever put in here. Let's cut this, paste, and then console.log banana. If I save, go back to the browser and refresh, we get the same thing. Understand? The value, the element that is being removed is being returned and can be stored in another variable or using some kind of computation. All up to you. Okay, so remember, pop removes the last element of the array, just as push inserts into the last position of the array. Any confusion? No, I believe you're not confused. So let's proceed. We also have the shift. Shift removes the first element of the array, which it also returns, just like the pop. So we have shift, right? So if I do console.log my array dot shift, and then underneath I console.log my array, if I save this and refresh, you see we get mango, because mango was initially the first element, it was removed. So when you call the dot shift method, it returns the element it returns the element that has been removed from the array, which you know what we can do with it. Just like the pop, when it's returned, we store it in a variable. Likewise, the shift, once it returns it, we can do whatever we want with the return value or ignore it. And then by the time we log the array itself, its original size has actually changed. It now has only 2 elements within it. Now the opposite of this shift, or the next one after shift, is on shift. Now I'm very sure you can guess what this does. If push adds to the first, pop push adds to the last, pop removes the last, shift removes the first, on shift will do what? Add to the first position. Dead simple. So if I do console.log my array dot on shift, and then put in here color, save. Okay, let's go underneath that and then do a console.log my array, save this, go back to the browser and refresh. You see we get color here, and if you notice, the length of the array is what is being returned by the onShift method. It returns the length. You see now we have 3, right? Okay, so let's proceed. Another method, or the last one I'm going to be discussing, is the join method. So it's called join. Dead simple. Join. What this one, we actually use it to join elements of an array to form a single value or a single string. Rather, you can actually use it to form a sentence, for instance. So let me define a new array, call it let's say message list, and I set this equal to an array literal. Let's say my name is 0, for example. I can simply join all of this. If I do a console.log, I can do message list dot join. Now the join takes in a separator like you see on the screen. So if I put in a white space, it's going to join each element with a white space coming after them. So if I save, go to the browser and refresh, you see we get this string, my name is 0. If I change this to, let's say, a comma, save and refresh, you see we have white space and then comma because that's what I did here, a white space and then a comma. I can actually take out the white space in front and add it behind, save, refresh. Now the result is as expected, a comma, white space, then the next one, white space, next one, just like that. And if you notice, it did not add it to the last one. Yes, it did not really add that comma and white space to the last element. So you've seen some of these methods. There are so many of them. You can actually go online and read more about them. And if you have any issues, do well to contact me. So moving on to objects. Let's talk about objects. Now objects are just regular JavaScript variables like before, but this time their values come in pairs. They come in name value pairs. You understand? It's an object that holds multiple. It's a variable that holds multiple values, but these values comes in a name value pairs. You understand? Okay. So in JavaScript we have primitive values, and these primitive values do not have properties and methods. You can't actually you can't call a property or execute a method of primitive values. For instance, you can't do hello dot. You can't really execute some probably like 7 dots length does not exist, or dot size, or dot round. Those kind of things you don't really have them. But 7 is a number which is a primitive value. But we also have primitive data types, and primitive data types are just data whose value is a primitive data. You understand? Kind of complicated. Like the data types, their data are primitive values, and primitive values do not have methods and properties attached to them. So some of the primitive data types you have in JavaScript are strings, numbers, boolean, null, and undefined. Primitive values are said to be immutable. In essence, you can't really change them. For instance, 8 is a primitive value, and you can't change. 8 remains 8. You can't really change the meaning of 8 in JavaScript. If I do let s equals 8, s here is a variable, and therefore I can change its value probably to 2 or 3. I can do x equals 4. This would work just fine, but I can't change the meaning of 8. I can't say let 8 equals 6. This is not possible. I can't really do that. Understand? I can't change the value of 8. 8 is 8. Just like strings as well. If I do hello remains hello. I can't change hello to mean something else. Okay. Alright, so let me clear dev 2. So like I said before, objects are regular JavaScript variables whose values are written as name value pairs, and they are separated by columns. These name and values are separated using columns. So an object, so let's say I want to define an object here, const person. I can set this equal to a curly brace. Very important. In array we use square brackets. Objects we use curly brace. And then set a property called name, and then set the value to join. So this is called a property. Yes, it comes in name value pairs. This is termed as a property, and this is the value of that property. Mind you, just because it's name doesn't mean all properties of an object must be named. So I can do another property called age and set this to 54. Now this is programmer defined. The name of a property or the identifier of a property is programmer defined. You choose whatever characters, as long as you do not define the supported sequence of characters for naming variables and identifiers in JavaScript, which I did not discuss, but no problem. So we have this, these two are properties. Now, when we have more than one property inside an object, we separate each with a comma. Very important. We separate each and every one of them with a comma. Now, to reference properties of an object, we use the dot notation. So I can do console.log person dot name. If I save this, go back to the browser and refresh, you see we get John right here, which is coming from this part of the program. Let me comment all of this out so we don't so if I refresh, okay, we still have more here. Let me comment all of this property. Understand? Now if you even notice, you see the console here is also an object, and then .log is a method. We've not actually defined a method. So methods are simply properties of an object whose value is a function. You understand? We've discussed functions before, so I can write a property called speak and set the value to a function, and all this will do is console.log hey dear. Understand? That's simple. Or let me take this out. Hey dear. And if I want to reference this speak method, all I just have to do is say person dot speak, and then I have to add the parenthesis. Very important. This parenthesis, this one in front, is necessary. Remember, when you want to invoke a function, you add the parenthesis in front of it. So also it is for methods. So if I save this, go back to the browser and refresh, you see hey dear, which is coming from this method right here, and this instruction is being executed. Any confusion? No. I guess we can proceed. Yes. Now, just like regular functions, methods can accept values and return values as well. You can do almost anything a regular function would actually do. So there are several ways to actually create objects in JavaScript. So this that I did here, this approach I use here, is called object literal. So I use an object literal to define an object. This pattern is called object literal, the opening curly brace, closing curly brace, and then properties within it. Very simple. Instant. But what this allows us to do is create just one object. It only allows us to create a single well-defined object. Understand? Also, we have the new keyword. Or before we discuss the new keyword, you can also use the object literal in another way. I can just say person2 is equal to set it to an empty object. At this point in time, there are no properties nor methods within person2, so I can say person2 dot first name and set this to what's wrong with me? Set this to John, and let's see, do person2 dot last name and set this to it's very difficult to actually talk and type at the same time. It's not easy. And then if I log this to the console, person2, save, go back to the browser, refresh, you see we get this object with two properties within it, first name and last name. First name with the value John, and last name with the value do. So this is another way to still do the object literal. In this scenario, we just dump everything in there straight up. In this approach, we define an empty object and then start attaching properties to it using the dot notation. Both approach is actually object literal. They are both object literal. So also we can use the new keyword. So I can say new keyword So I can say const person 3 is equals to new object parenthesis. So I can put in value. I can put in a sequence of values within that, but I don't want to do that. I just say person 3 dot name is equals to, and then let's console dot log person 3. If I save, go back to the browser and refresh, you see we get the same thing, an object with the property name which value is 0. That's simple, very easy. Now another way that we can create objects in JavaScript is using the object is by defining a constructor and then instantiating the constructor to create objects. That I'm not going to do in this particular class. I'm going to do that when we start discussing object-oriented programming. Then I will dive deeper into all of that. And also we use the object of create. So I'm not going to do any of those two in this class. As we proceed, we will see more and more methods and more approach to do some certain things. Alright. So one thing to also note though is that objects are mutable, in the sense that you can change them. They are very easy to change, and also they are passed by reference. Objects are passed by reference by default. So I can't do const person 4 equals person 3. For instance, if I do this, I'm not creating a clone of person 3. Rather, I'm using the variable person 4 to reference the object in person 3. If I console.log person 4 and save, go to the browser, refresh, you see we get the same thing. So in order to prove that it's the same object, I can do person 4 dot name and change this to zeta, for instance, and then let's console dot log person 3. If I save this, go back to the browser and refresh, you see we get zeta. The name changes, you understand? But that was done using person 4. The reason why it is so is because person 4 is not a new object. It does not create a new object. Rather, it references the same object stored in person 3. Understand? The object is currently in the memory, and both variables point to the same object. Okay? Alright. So I guess this way I will stop for today's class. I don't want to add so much information or make it too complicated for a lot of persons, because they are always complaining, your classes are too long, so I'm trying to shorten them as much as possible. I think this should be the shortest I've done so far. Yes, I believe so. And also I am open for business. If any of you is interested in or have a web development job, please do well to contact me. I am open for business. Thank you very much and have a great day.